The morning Penelope Barrett discovered her father dead in the barn, frost already covering his weathered face. She knew winter would kill her too if she did not prepare. Wichita, Kansas in October of 1879 showed no mercy to anyone, least of all a 19-year-old woman suddenly alone on a struggling homestead with nothing but debts and a leaky cabin roof. She had buried him that same afternoon in the hard ground behind the house, her hands blistering on the shovel handle, her tears freezing on her cheeks as the wind howled across the prairie like 1,000 wolves crying for blood. Now, 3 days later, Penelope stood in the woods behind her property, her father's axe heavy in her grip as she eyed another dead cottonwood. She had been at this since dawn, and the pile of split logs near her cabin had grown to a respectable size, but not nearly enough. Her father had always said you needed a woodpile as tall as the cabin itself to make it through a Kansas winter, and she had maybe a third of that. Her arms ached, her back screamed, but stopping meant dying, so she swung the axe again. The blade bit deep into the trunk, and she worked it free with a grunt that would have scandalized the ladies back in town. Those same ladies who had looked at her with pity and speculation at the general store yesterday, when she had tried to buy supplies on credit. The store owner, Mr. Henderson, had shaken his head slowly, his jowls wobbling with false sympathy. "Cannot do it, Miss Barrett. Your father owed me $18 already. I am a businessman, not a charity house." She had walked out with nothing but the same cornmeal and beans she had walked in with, her face burning with humiliation. That night she had eaten thin soup and understood with perfect clarity that she had two choices: survive or surrender. Surrender meant going to her aunt and St. Louis, becoming a burden, probably being married off to whoever would take a penniless girl with calloused hands and a stubborn streak. Survival meant wood and food and making it to spring. The tree finally fell with a satisfying crack, and Penelope set about limbing it with methodical strikes. The repetitive work let her mind wander, which was dangerous. She kept seeing her father's face, kept hearing his last words to her the night before he died. "You are stronger than you know, Penny girl. You have got steel in your spine." She hoped he was right. She was about to find out. By noon, she had dragged 3 more trees back to the cabin using her father's old mare, Daisy, who was nearly as ancient and stubborn as he had been. The pile was growing. She split logs until her vision blurred, stacking them against the north wall where her father had always kept the winter supply. The rhythm was almost meditative. Lift, position, swing, split, stack. Over and over until the sun began its descent and the temperature dropped further. She was reaching for another log when she heard the horse. Penelope straightened, pushing sweat-dampened hair from her face despite the cold, and squinted toward the horizon. A rider was approaching from the east, moving at an easy lope. Her heart kicked up nervously. A woman alone was vulnerable in 100 different ways, and she had no gun, her father's rifle having been sold 6 months ago to pay for medicine that had not worked anyway. The rider drew closer, and she could make out details. A tall man on a paint horse, wearing a brown duster and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. He sat his saddle like someone who had been born there, and even from a distance, she could tell he was young, probably not much older than she was. Something in his posture suggested he was no threat, but Penelope kept the axe in her hand anyway, the handle slick with her sweat. He reined in about 20 feet from her cabin, removing his hat in a gesture of respect that surprised her. His face was tanned from long days in the sun, with dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once: her ramshackle cabin, her inadequate woodpile, her defensive stance with the axe. "Afternoon, miss," he said, his voice a low rumble that carried easily in the cold air. Name is Adam Vaughn. I was riding through and saw you working. Wondered if you might need some help. Penelope's first instinct was to refuse. She had been taking care of herself for 3 days now, and pride was sometimes all a person had left. But then she looked at her woodpile, thought about the long winter ahead, and swallowed that pride like bitter medicine. "Why would you help me?" she asked, not lowering the axe. "What do you want in return?" Adam Vaughn dismounted in one fluid motion, looping his reins over a nearby fence post. He was tall, she realized, maybe 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the kind of lean strength that came from hard work rather than bulk. He could not have been more than 22 or 23, but his eyes held the wary caution of someone who had seen trouble. "Nothing, miss. Just trying to be a decent human being. I've got a camp about 5 miles east, been doing some work for the Hendricks Ranch, fixing fences mostly. Winter is coming on hard, and I figured you might appreciate an extra pair of hands." He nodded toward her woodpile. "That is not going to be enough." The blunt honesty stung, but she appreciated it more than false flattery. "I know. My father died 3 days ago. I am doing the best I can." Something shifted in his expression, a softening that might have been sympathy but did not feel like pity. "I am sorry for your loss." "All the more reason to let me help. I am good with an axe, and I can split more in an hour than you could in a day. No offense intended, just facts." Penelope wanted to argue, but her aching body would not let her. "I cannot pay you, did not ask you to. I do not have food to spare. Got my own provisions." She studied him for a long moment, searching for any hint of ulterior motive, any suggestion that his help would come with expectations she was not willing to meet. But his gaze was steady and honest, and something in her gut, the same instinct that had helped her father judge horse flesh and men's character, told her Adam Vaughn was genuine. "All right," she said finally, lowering the axe. "But just for today, I can manage after that." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, as if he knew that was a lie but was too polite to say so. "Just for today," he agreed. He shrugged out of his duster, revealing a faded blue work shirt and suspenders, and grabbed her axe before she could protest. She watched, slightly affronted, as he moved to the pile of unsplit logs and began working with an efficiency that made her efforts look like a child playing at chores. His axe sang through the air, each strike precise and powerful, splitting logs that had given her fits into clean halves and quarters. Within minutes, he had doubled her output. Penelope stood there feeling useless until practicality kicked in. If he was going to split, she would stack. She began gathering the pieces he was producing at an alarming rate and adding them to her pile against the cabin wall. They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the rhythmic thunk of the axe and the occasional snort from one of the horses. After about an hour, Adam paused to catch his breath, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cold. "You have got more trees that need cutting, back in the woods, 3 more that are dead and ready. We should get those today if we can. Temperature is dropping, be harder tomorrow." The casual "we" should have irritated her, but instead it sent a strange warmth through her chest. She had been alone, truly alone, since her father's death, and having someone else share the burden, even temporarily, felt like being able to breathe again after nearly drowning. They worked through the afternoon, Adam felling trees with practiced ease while Penelope limbed them and Daisy dragged them back to the cabin. It was hard, exhausting work, but with 2 of them, it went faster than she had thought possible. Adam did not talk much, but when he did, it was practical conversation about the best way to stack wood for drying, which trees burned hottest, how to tell if a tree was truly dead or just dormant. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie in shades of orange and gold, they stood together and surveyed their work. The woodpile was now respectably large, maybe half of what she would need, but infinitely better than what she had started with that morning. "That is a good start," Adam said, rolling his shoulders to loosen tight muscles. "But you are going to need twice that to make it through winter, more if it is a hard one." Penelope felt her brief moment of satisfaction crumble. "I know. I will keep working on it." He glanced at her, then at the darkening sky. "I will come back tomorrow, and the day after if you need. Like I said, I have got time before my next job. I told you I cannot pay you, and I told you I am not asking for payment." He moved to his horse, gathering the reins. "I will be here at first light. We can get another load cut and split before noon." Before she could protest, he had swung into the saddle. He looked down at her, his face shadowed by his hat, and for a moment their eyes met. Something passed between them, some unspoken understanding that this was about more than just firewood, that in the harsh reality of frontier life, people helped each other or they died alone. "Thank you," Penelope said, and meant it. Adam nodded, settled his hat more firmly, and rode off into the gathering dusk. She watched him go until he was just a dark speck against the horizon, then turned back to her cabin. Her body ached in 100 places, but her woodpile was larger, and for the first time since her father's death, she felt something like hope. That night, she ate her meager soup and thought about Adam Vaughn. He was a stranger, and she knew nothing about him except that he was good with an axe and seemed to have a decent heart. In her experience, that was more than most men could claim. She fell asleep wondering if he would really come back or if she had been a fool to hope. But when the first gray light of dawn crept through her cabin's single window, she heard the sound of hoofbeats, and her heart did a strange little leap. She dressed quickly in her work clothes, her father's old trousers that she had belted tight around her waist and a flannel shirt that was too large, and stepped outside to find Adam already dismounting. "Morning," he said, as if showing up at a strange woman's cabin at dawn was the most natural thing in the world. Ready to cut some wood, she could not help the smile that tugged at her lips. Ready. They fell into a rhythm over the next several days. Adam would arrive at first light. They would work until noon cutting and hauling, then spend the afternoon splitting and stacking. He never pushed into her space, never asked invasive questions, never made her feel like his help came with strings attached. But he did talk more as the days passed, sharing bits and pieces of his life. He was from Texas originally, San Antonio, where his father had been a sheriff until a bank robber's bullet ended his life when Adam was 16. His mother had remarried a year later to a man Adam did not get along with, and he had left home at 17 to make his own way. He had worked cattle drives, hired his gun out as a guard for wagon trains, done whatever honest work he could find as he drifted north. He had been in Kansas for 6 months, working various ranches, saving money for a dream he did not quite articulate. In return, Penelope shared her own story. She had been born in Ohio, but her mother had died when she was 8, and her father had moved them west looking for a fresh start. They had tried farming, but her father had never quite gotten the hang of it, and drought and debt had slowly crushed them. He had been a good man, she insisted, just unlucky. Adam had nodded, saying nothing, but she thought she saw understanding in his eyes. By the end of the first week, the woodpile had grown significantly. By the end of the second, it was nearly as tall as the cabin. Penelope knew she should tell Adam that he had done enough, that she could finish the rest herself. But every morning when he showed up, she felt relieved instead of burdened. She had started to look forward to his arrival, to the sound of his voice and the easy way he moved through her days. She was in trouble, she realized one evening as she watched him ride away. She was starting to care about Adam Vaughn, This stranger who had shown up at exactly the moment she needed someone most. It was foolish, probably dangerous, and completely unavoidable. The next day was Sunday, and she did not expect him to come. Most folks in Wichita, religious or not, observed the Sabbath as a day of rest. So when she woke and began her usual chores, feeding Daisy and the 3 chickens she had left, hauling water from the well, she tried not to feel disappointed. She was scrubbing her only pot clean when she heard the hoofbeats. Her heart jumped, and she hated herself a little for the surge of happiness that came with it. She dried her hands on her apron and stepped outside to find Adam dismounting, but this time he was carrying something. "Brought you something," he said, holding up a cloth-wrapped bundle. "Figured you might be tired of beans." Penelope accepted the bundle suspiciously and unwrapped it to find fresh bread, a chunk of cheese, some dried apples, and a small sack of coffee. Real coffee. Her throat tightened. "You did not have to do this." "I know, wanted to." He shifted his weight, looking almost uncertain for the first time since she had met him. "Thought maybe you might want to take the day off from wood cutting. Could use a rest myself, but if you wanted company, I would not mind staying." It was the closest he had come to acknowledging that this had become more than just a work arrangement, and Penelope felt her pulse quicken. She should say no. She should maintain proper boundaries. But she was so tired of being alone, and Adam Vaughn's company had become the best part of her days. "I will make coffee," she said. They sat on the rough bench her father had built outside the cabin door, drinking strong coffee and eating bread with cheese while the prairie stretched empty and beautiful around them. The November air was cold but clear, and the sun felt good on her face. For the first time in weeks, Penelope allowed herself to just exist without panic, without fear. "Can I ask you something?" Adam said after a long, comfortable silence. "All right. Why are you so set on staying here? This place, forgive me for saying it, but it is not much. You are young, you could go somewhere, start over somewhere easier." Penelope had asked herself the same question 100 times. "It is mine. The only thing in the world that is mine. My father and I built that cabin together. He is buried here. If I leave, I am admitting that all our struggle was for nothing. I'm not ready to do that yet." Adam nodded slowly. "I understand that, more than you might think. What about you? You said you are saving for something. What is it?" He was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Finally, he said, "A piece of land. Nothing big, just enough for some cattle, maybe horses. A place where I could stay put, build something permanent. I have been drifting for 5 years now, and I am tired of it. Tired of not belonging anywhere." "That sounds like a good dream." "It is just a dream if I cannot afford the land, but I am getting close. Another year, maybe 2, and I will have enough." They sat in silence again, but it was charged now with unspoken thoughts. Penelope wondered if he was thinking the same thing she was, if the same impossible idea was taking shape in his mind. 2 people, each alone, each struggling, each with dreams that seemed just out of reach. Together, maybe those dreams would not be so impossible. But it was too soon for such thoughts. She barely knew him. And yet she felt like she knew the important things, the things that mattered. She knew he was honest and hardworking. She knew he was kind without being soft, strong without being cruel. She knew that when he looked at her, he saw a person, not just a woman, not just a burden or an opportunity. "I should go," Adam said eventually, though he did not move. "Let you have your day of rest, or you could stay," Penelope said, surprising herself. "I mean for dinner. I could cook something with these supplies you brought. It is the least I can do." A smile spread slowly across his face, transforming it from handsome to breathtaking. "I would like that very much." So he stayed, and they talked while she cooked. She made cornbread with the flour and eggs she had been hoarding. fried up some of the salt pork from his supplies, and heated beans seasoned with a precious bit of the dried peppers her father had grown last summer. It was a feast by recent standards, and they ate together as the sun set, sitting at the small table inside her cabin while the temperature dropped outside. Adam told her about Texas, about the vast openness of it, and the way the heat could shimmer off the ground in waves. She told him about Ohio, about green hills and forests so thick you could get lost in them. They talked about books they had read, though neither had much education. They talked about the future, carefully, as if testing the waters. When full darkness fell, Adam stood reluctantly. "I really should go. Do not want folks talking." Penelope walked him to the door, acutely aware of how small her cabin was, how close they were standing. "Thank you for today, for everything." "Penelope," he said, and the sound of her full name on his lips sent a shiver through her. He had been calling her Miss this whole time. "I want to keep helping, not just with the wood, with whatever you need. I know it is forward of me, but I would like to keep coming around if that is all right with you." She looked up at him, at his earnest face and honest eyes, and made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "I would like that too." His smile returned, and for just a moment his hand came up as if he might touch her face, but he caught himself and let it drop. "Then I will see you tomorrow. We should finish that wood pile." After he left, Penelope lay in her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. She was falling for Adam Vaughn. No, that was not quite right. She had already fallen. Now she was just waiting to see if he would catch her or if she was going to hit the ground hard enough to break. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of wood cutting and careful conversation. The woodpile grew taller and taller, and so did Penelope's feelings. She caught herself watching Adam when he worked, admiring the way his muscles moved under his shirt, the concentration on his face when he was lining up a difficult cut. Several times, she looked up to find him watching her with the same intensity, and the air between them would crackle with tension until one of them looked away. It came to a head on a cold afternoon in late November. They had been working hard all morning, and the woodpile was now substantially taller than the cabin itself, a mountain of split logs that represented security and survival. Adam was stacking the last armload when he paused, looking at their handiwork with satisfaction. "That should do it," he said. "That will get you through the winter and then some." Penelope felt a sharp pang of loss. If the wood was done, Adam had no reason to keep coming around. She had been so focused on surviving that she had not let herself think about what would happen when the work was finished. "Thank you," she managed. "I could not have done this without you. I would have frozen, probably." Adam set down the wood and turned to face her fully. The late afternoon sun was behind him, turning him into a silhouette, and when he spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. "I did not do this just to keep you from freezing, Penelope. I think you know that." Her heart was suddenly pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Then why did you do it?" He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Because from the first moment I saw you, standing here with that axe looking like you would fight the whole world if it came for you, I knew I wanted to be part of your life. I have been alone for a long time, and I did not even realize how much I hated it until I found someone worth staying for." Penelope could not breathe. "Adam, I do not have anything to offer you. I am broke. This land is mortgaged. I am barely surviving. You have got everything I need. You are strong and brave and stubborn as hell. You are beautiful, though I do not think you know it. And when I ride up to this cabin every morning, I am happier than I have been in 5 years. That is worth more than money. But your dream, your land, your cattle." He reached out and finally touched her face, his calloused fingers gentle on her cheek. "Maybe my dream changed. Maybe it is standing right in front of me." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes, hot against the cold air. I am scared. Everything I have ever loved I have lost. I am scared too, but I am more scared of riding away and spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been. His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. I love you, Penelope Barrett. I know it is fast, and I know we have not known each other long, but I am sure of it. I love you, and I want to stay. I want to help you make this place work. I want to build a life with you. She was crying in earnest now, but they were not sad tears. They were relief and joy and fear and hope all tangled together. I love you too. I think I have since the day you showed up and just started helping without expecting anything in return. Adam pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, pressing her face against his chest and breathing in the scent of him. Wood smoke and pine and something uniquely his own. His arms around her felt like safety, like home, like the first good thing that had happened to her in longer than she could remember. I will keep you warm forever, he murmured into her hair. That is my promise to you. Through every winter, through everything that comes, I will be here. She pulled back just enough to look up at him, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. Then he was kissing her, gentle and careful at first, as if she might break, but she kissed him back with all the pent-up longing of the past few weeks, and the kiss deepened, became urgent and claiming. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she felt like something fundamental had shifted in the universe. Marry me, Adam said. I know it is crazy and too fast and we probably should wait, but marry me anyway. Let me be your family. Let me help you save this place. Penelope laughed, a sound of pure happiness that surprised them both. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. He kissed her again, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around while she laughed and clung to him. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools, and Penelope felt lighter than she had in months. We should probably figure out the practical stuff, she said, trying to regain some composure. Like where you are going to sleep until we are actually married. People talk. I will keep my camp for now, come over every day. We can get married as soon as possible. Is there a preacher in town? Reverend Matthews. He does services every Sunday. Then we will talk to him this Sunday. Get married next Sunday if he will do it. It was insanely fast, wildly impractical, and absolutely right. Penelope nodded. All right, 1 week. Then you are stuck with me. Cannot wait to be stuck with you. They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, talking about how they would make the homestead work, what they needed to do before winter truly set in. Adam had saved a decent amount of money from his various jobs, enough to buy seed for spring planting and maybe some chickens. They would need to repair the cabin roof before the snow came. There was so much to do, but with two of them working together, it felt possible instead of impossible. That Sunday, they rode into Wichita together, Adam on his paint and Penelope on Old Daisy. It was the first time they had appeared in public as a couple, and Penelope felt the stares, heard the whispers. The preacher's daughter and the Barrett girl and that drifter, moving awful fast, wonder what that is about. She held her head high and ignored them. Let them talk. She knew what she had, and it was real. Reverend Matthews was a kind man in his 50s who had known Penelope since she was a girl. He looked between her and Adam with shrewd eyes, then invited them into his small office behind the church. You want to get married, he said. It was not a question. Yes, sir, Adam said. As soon as possible if you are willing to perform the ceremony. Son, I do not know you. And Penelope here just lost her father. Some might say this is too quick, that maybe you both need time to think. With respect, Reverend, Penelope said, I have had nothing but time to think since my father died. I know my own heart and I know Adam's. We want to build a life together and we need to be married to do that properly. The Reverend studied them for a long moment. then sighed. I have learned over the years that when two people are determined to get married, they will find a way with or without the church's blessing. I would rather see it done right. Next Sunday, after the service. But I expect you both to think hard about this over the next week. Make sure you are certain. They agreed, though Penelope knew nothing would change her mind. After they left the church, Adam insisted on taking her to the general store. Mr. Henderson looked nervous when they walked in together, probably worried about the money Penelope's father owed, but Adam pulled out cash and bought flour, sugar, coffee, salt, and several other necessities that Penelope had been doing without. "This is too much," she whispered as Adam piled goods on the counter. "It is what you need. Consider it a wedding present." Mr. Henderson's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "Wedding? Well now, congratulations to you both. About time someone took care of our Penelope here." Penelope bit back a sharp retort about how she had been taking care of herself just fine, but Adam squeezed her hand gently, and she let it go. They left with arms full of supplies, and several of the townspeople called out congratulations that ranged from sincere to skeptical. The week before the wedding was a flurry of activity. Adam moved into the barn to maintain propriety, though Penelope thought it was ridiculous given that they would be married in a matter of days. They spent the time making repairs to the cabin, patching the roof with spare shingles Adam scavenged from an abandoned homestead 5 miles away, chinking gaps in the walls with mud and grass to keep out drafts. They worked side by side, and Penelope marveled at how natural it felt, how right. On Friday evening, Adam surprised her by riding back from town with fabric tucked into his saddlebags. "For a wedding dress," he said, handing her several yards of dark blue calico. "I know it is not fancy, but I thought you might want something." Penelope accepted the fabric with trembling hands. She had not owned a new dress in 3 years. "It is perfect, thank you." She stayed up late that night and the next, sewing by lamplight, her stitches careful and neat. She had not made a dress in ages, but her mother had taught her well, and the skills came back. The dress was simple, with a fitted bodice and a full skirt, but when she tried it on Saturday night, she felt beautiful for the first time in longer than she could remember. Sunday morning dawned cold and bright. Penelope put on her new dress, brushed her long brown hair until it shone, and twisted it into a simple bun at the nape of her neck. She had no jewelry except her mother's wedding band, which she wore on a chain around her neck. When Adam saw her, standing in the doorway of the cabin, his face went soft with wonder. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He was wearing his best shirt, dark gray and obviously new, with black trousers and a string tie. He had shaved and gotten a haircut in town, and Penelope thought he looked impossibly handsome, like something out of a dream. They rode to town together, and this time, when people stared, it was with curiosity rather than judgment. Word had spread about the wedding, and the small church was surprisingly full when they arrived. Neighbors Penelope had not seen in months had come, along with some of the men Adam had worked with at the Hendricks Ranch. It seemed people loved a wedding, even a hasty one. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony with quiet dignity, asking them to repeat vows that were simple but profound. To have and to hold for better or for worse in sickness and in health, until death parted them. When Adam slipped a thin gold band on her finger, Penelope gasped. She had not expected a ring. "It was my mother's," he whispered. "She gave it to me before I left Texas, said I should give it to the woman I married. I think she would be happy it is you." Penelope felt tears threatening again, but held them back. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Adam kissed her gently, sweetly, and the small congregation applauded. The townspeople had organized a simple reception in the church hall, with donated food and someone's fiddle providing music. People came up to congratulate them, to wish them well, and Penelope saw genuine warmth in most of their eyes. Maybe they had judged her situation more kindly than she had realized. Maybe people were rooting for her after all. As the afternoon wore on and they prepared to leave, Mrs. Henderson, the store owner's wife, pulled Penelope aside. "I am glad you found someone, dear. Your father would be happy to know you are not alone anymore. And that young man of yours, he has good eyes. Honest eyes. You chose well." "Thank you," Penelope said, meaning it. They rode back to the homestead as the sun was setting, husband and wife now, legally and spiritually bound. When they reached the cabin, Adam dismounted and helped Penelope down, but instead of releasing her, he swept her up into his arms. "What are you doing?" she laughed. "Carrying my bride over the threshold. It is tradition." He carried her inside and set her down gently in the middle of their small cabin. Their cabin now, not just hers. The realization hit her all at once, the magnitude of what they had just done, and she felt a flutter of nervousness. Adam seemed to sense it. He took her hands in his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her wrists. "We do not have to do anything tonight except be together. There is no rush. We have the rest of our lives." But Penelope shook her head. "I want this. I want you. I am just a little scared because I have never." She trailed off, heat flooding her cheeks. Understanding and tenderness filled Adam's eyes. "Neither have I. We will figure it out together." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Penelope felt the nervousness melt away, replaced by warmth and desire. They took their time, learning each other in the lamplight, clumsy and sweet and perfect. When they finally came together, it was with whispered promises and gentle hands, and afterward, as they lay tangled in the narrow bed, Penelope felt a completeness she had never known existed. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Adam replied, holding her close. Forever. Winter came hard that year, just as everyone had predicted. Snow fell heavy and deep, and the wind howled across the prairie like a living thing. But inside the cabin, with the fire burning bright and the woodpile that Adam had helped her build standing tall against the north wall, Penelope was warm. They rationed their supplies carefully, and Adam did odd jobs in town when the weather allowed, bringing home extra money and food. It was not easy. Some days they went to bed hungry. Some nights the wind found cracks in the walls they had missed and cold seeped in anyway, but they had each other and that made all the difference. They talked for hours, learning each other's thoughts and dreams. They played cards by firelight. They read aloud from the 3 books they owned, taking turns with different voices for different characters, until they were both laughing. And at night, in their narrow bed, they came together with growing confidence and joy, learning what pleased each other, building an intimacy that went far beyond the physical. Penelope had never imagined marriage could be like this, a partnership of equals, a friendship as deep as the love. As winter wore on, they made plans for spring. They would plant a bigger garden, maybe buy a few pigs to raise. Adam wanted to try his hand at breaking a wild Mustang he had seen running with a small herd near their property, see if he could train it to sell. Penelope wanted to try her hand at cheese making, maybe sell it in town if it was any good. Christmas came and they had almost nothing, but Adam surprised her by carving a small wooden bird that fit in her palm, its wings spread in flight. "So you remember you are free now," he said. "Not trapped anymore, not alone." She gave him a scarf she had knitted from unraveled yarn, her stitches clumsy but made with love. He wore it every day after that, even when spring began to thaw the snow. By February, Penelope realized she had missed her monthly courses twice. She said nothing at first, afraid to hope, but by March, there was no denying it. She was carrying Adam's child. She told him one evening as they were eating supper, her heart in her throat. "Adam, I have something to tell you. I am with child." He went completely still, his fork halfway to his mouth. Then slowly, a smile spread across his face that rivaled the sun. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be. 3 months, I think, maybe 4. He was around the table in an instant, pulling her up and into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" she had to ask, even though his reaction made the answer obvious. Happy does not begin to cover it. "Penelope, you have just made me the luckiest man alive." They held each other in the small cabin, swaying slightly, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. The future suddenly seemed full of promise in a way it never had before. Spring came fully in April, melting the last of the snow and turning the prairie green. Adam plowed their small field, and together they planted corn, beans, squash, and potatoes. Penelope's belly was starting to show, a gentle swell that Adam loved to rest his hand on in the evenings. They bought 3 pigs with Adam's carefully saved money, and he built a pen for them. He also managed to catch and break that Mustang, a beautiful paint mare that he sold for a tidy profit to a rancher passing through. Life was still hard, but it was good. The garden grew. The pigs fattened. Penelope sewed baby clothes from scraps and old fabric, her hands busy while Adam read to her in the evenings. They talked about names. James for a boy, after Adam's father. Clara for a girl, after Penelope's mother. In July, when the heat shimmered off the prairie and the corn stood tall, a man came riding up to their cabin. He was older, maybe 50, well-dressed, and sat his horse with the confidence of money. Penelope and Adam were both working in the garden when he arrived, and they stopped, immediately wary. "Good afternoon," the man said, tipping his hat. "Name is Richard Holbrook. I am with the land office in Wichita. Are you Penelope Barrett?" "Penelope Vaughn now," she said, moving closer to Adam. "What is this about?" "I am here about your property. There is some question about the deed and the mortgage that your father held. I need to ask you some questions." Penelope's heart sank. This was it. They were going to lose the land, everything they had worked for. Adam must have sensed her panic because he took her hand, squeezing gently. "What kind of questions?" Adam asked, his voice level but with an edge of steel. Holbrook dismounted, pulling papers from his saddlebag. "When your father filed the original homestead claim, Miss Vaughn, he listed this property as 160 acres. However, recent surveys suggest he may have actually claimed closer to 180 acres. Additionally, the mortgage he held with the bank shows several discrepancies in the payments." "What does that mean?" Penelope asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Holbrook looked at her, and to her surprise he smiled. "It means, Mrs. Vaughn, that the bank has been overcharging you. In fact, according to my calculations, your father overpaid by approximately $47 over the course of 5 years. With the additional acreage, which is yours by right as the original claimant, and the overpayment, you own this land free and clear. No debt, no mortgage." Penelope could not process the words. They did not make sense. "We own it, outright." "Yes, madam. I have the corrected deed here made out in your name and your husband's. The bank has also issued a refund for the overpayment, which I am authorized to give you today." He handed over the papers and a small leather pouch that clinked with the weight of coins. Penelope took them with shaking hands, still not quite believing. Adam pulled her close, and they both stared at the deed, at their names written in official script, at the words "paid in full" stamped across the bottom. "Thank you," Adam managed, his voice thick. "Thank you so much." Holbrook nodded. "Just doing my job." Congratulations on your land and on the upcoming baby. Good luck to you both." He rode away, leaving them standing in their garden holding the proof that they had a real future on land that was truly theirs. Penelope started crying, great heaving sobs of relief and joy, and Adam held her while she fell apart, his own tears wetting her hair. "We made it," she said when she could finally speak. "We actually made it. We did, together." That night, they celebrated with a feast by their standards, using some of the precious refund money to buy supplies in town. They ate roasted chicken and fresh vegetables from their garden and cornbread with real butter, and they talked late into the night about what they would do now that the land was truly theirs. "We could build a bigger house," Adam said. "Something with 2 bedrooms, maybe 3 eventually. A real house, not just a cabin. And a barn," Penelope added. "A proper barn for horses. You are good with them. We could build that into something, training and selling them. We could plant an orchard, apples, maybe cherries. They would take a few years to produce, but it would be worth it." They spun dreams like spider webs, delicate but strong, and for the first time those dreams felt achievable. They had land, they had each other, and they had a baby on the way. It was more than enough. In October, as the first cold winds began to blow across the prairie again, Penelope went into labor. Mrs. Henderson came to help, along with another woman from town who had experience with births. Adam paced outside the cabin, wearing a path in the dirt, jumping at every sound. It was long and hard, and there were moments when Penelope thought she could not do it, could not push any more, could not survive this. But Mrs. Henderson was firm and encouraging, and finally, after what felt like days but was really about 14 hours, she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, a baby's cry, strong and indignant. "It is a boy," Mrs. Henderson said, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Penelope's chest. "A healthy baby boy." Penelope looked down at her son, at his tiny perfect fingers and his shock of dark hair, and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "Hello, James. Hello, sweet boy." The women cleaned her up and made her comfortable, then finally allowed Adam to come inside. He stood in the doorway looking terrified until Penelope smiled at him. "Come meet your son." He approached slowly, almost reverently, and when he looked down at the baby in her arms, his face crumpled with emotion. "He is perfect. You are both perfect. Thank you, Penelope. Thank you for him, for everything." James turned out to be a good baby, fussy at times but generally content. Penelope had never been so exhausted in her life, but she also had never been so happy. Watching Adam with his son was a revelation. He was patient and gentle, singing to James in a soft voice when he would not sleep, walking him around the cabin for hours when he was colicky. That winter was easier than the last. The woodpile was even bigger, their food stores were more substantial, and the cabin was warmer with 3 bodies instead of 2. They took turns caring for James through the long nights, and on the coldest days, they all huddled together in bed, a family. As the years passed, their homestead grew and thrived. They built the bigger house that they had dreamed of, with 3 bedrooms and a real kitchen and windows with actual glass. They built a barn and filled it with horses that Adam trained and sold at a good profit. Penelope started her cheese business, and it became so popular that she could barely keep up with demand. They had 2 more children, a daughter they named Clara when James was 3, and another son they named Thomas when Clara was 2. The house was loud and chaotic and full of love, and sometimes Penelope would stand in the kitchen and just listen to the sounds of her family. Adam teaching James to rope, Clara singing to her doll, Thomas babbling in his cradle, and feel overwhelmed with gratitude. But there were hard times too. The year Clara was 5, a drought hit that killed half their crops. They made it through, but barely, by selling off some of their horses and taking work wherever Adam could find it. When Thomas was 7, he got sick with scarlet fever, and for 3 terrifying weeks they thought they might lose him. But he pulled through, and the experience only made them hold their children tighter. Through it all, Adam and Penelope held fast to each other. They argued sometimes, because marriage was not always easy even when you loved each other deeply. But they always talked it through, always came back to the foundation they had built on that cold November day when he had first shown up to help her stack wood. One evening, when they had been married 15 years and James was preparing to go off to work on a ranch 2 counties over, Penelope and Adam sat on the porch of their house watching the sun set. The children were inside doing evening chores, and for a moment, they had peace. "Do you ever regret it?" Penelope asked. "Marrying me so fast, tying yourself to this place?" Adam turned to her, his face weathered now with years of sun and wind, but his eyes still as honest and warm as they had been that first day. "Not once, not for a single second. You are the best decision I ever made. Even when we almost lost the farm, even when things were so hard we were eating nothing but beans for weeks, even then, especially then, because we got through it together." He reached over and took her hand, his calluses matching hers after years of shared work. "I told you that first day that I would keep you warm forever. I meant it, not just physically but in every way. You are my home, Penelope, you and our children. Everything else is just details." She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the strength of him, the solidity. "I love you, still, always, forever." "Forever," he agreed. 20 more years passed, and their children grew and left to start families of their own, though they all stayed within a day's ride. James took over a neighboring ranch and married a schoolteacher from town. Clara married a farmer and gave them 4 grandchildren in rapid succession. Thomas followed in his father's footsteps, becoming one of the best horse trainers in Kansas. Penelope and Adam grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies slowing down, but their love never diminishing. They hired help for the heavy work eventually, a young couple who reminded them of themselves decades earlier, and they spent their days puttering around the property they had built together, sitting on the porch in the evenings, telling and retelling the story of how they had met. "Remember when you showed up out of nowhere and started chopping wood?" Penelope would say. "Remember how you stood there with that axe looking like you wanted to brain me with it?" Adam would reply. And they would laugh, because time had softened the fear and desperation of those days, leaving only the sweetness of the memory. On a cold November evening, 43 years after they had first met, Adam and Penelope sat by their fire in the house they had built, surrounded by photographs of children and grandchildren. They were in their 60s now, old by frontier standards, but still healthy, still together. "Do you know what today is?" Adam asked. "Of course I do. 43 years since you showed up and changed my life." "Want to go look at the woodpile?" Penelope laughed. "You old romantic. Yes, let's go look at the woodpile." They bundled up against the cold and walked out to the north side of the house where they still kept their winter wood supply, though now it was more tradition than necessity since they had a better stove and a smaller house to heat. The pile was neat and tall, and Adam put his arm around Penelope as they stood looking at it. "I stacked it higher than you did that day," he said, as he had said every year for 4 decades, "because I promised I would keep you warm forever." "And you have," she said, as she said every year in return. "You absolutely have." They stood there in the cold, 2 old people who had built a life from nothing but determination and love, and they were content. They had weathered every storm, survived every hardship, and come through it together. Their land was prosperous, their children were happy, and they had each other. That night, as they lay in bed, Adam pulled Penelope close the way he had done thousands of times before. "I love you," he said, "in case I forget to mention it tomorrow." "You never forget," she said. "Not once in 43 years. "Well, I do not plan to start now." They drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, and outside the wind began to pick up, carrying the promise of winter. But inside they were warm, and they would stay warm together for whatever time they had left. Because Adam Vaughn had made a promise to Penelope Barrett on a cold November day in 1879, and he had kept it through every season, every challenge, every year. He had promised to keep her warm forever, and he had done exactly that. The years continued to roll by gently after that anniversary. Adam and Penelope settled into the comfortable rhythm of their golden years, still rising early out of habit, still working their land, though with less intensity. They had hired hands who did most of the heavy labor now, young men who reminded them so much of themselves all those decades ago. They enjoyed watching the seasons change from their porch, drinking coffee in the mornings and tea in the evenings. Their conversations an easy blend of companionable silence and deep familiarity. Their children visited often, bringing grandchildren who climbed trees in the orchard Adam had planted 30 years earlier, and collected eggs from the chicken coop that Penelope still maintained herself. She taught her granddaughters to make cheese the way she had learned through trial and error, passing down skills and stories. Adam taught the grandsons about horses, his patience with them as infinite as it had been with his own children. On warm summer nights, the whole family would gather, 3 generations spreading blankets on the grass while the children chased fireflies. Adam and Penelope would sit in their rocking chairs, watching the beautiful chaos of their legacy, holding hands like newlyweds. Sometimes one of the grandchildren would ask how they had met, and the story would be told again, embellished slightly with each telling but always true in its essence. A woman alone, a stranger who helped, a woodpile that grew, and love that followed. As they moved into their late 60s, their health remained remarkably good, though age brought its inevitable aches and slowing. Penelope's hands grew stiff with arthritis, making her cheese work more difficult, but she stubbornly continued. Adam's back troubled him some mornings, a legacy of decades of hard labor, but he still made his rounds of the property each day, checking on fences and animals with the same diligence he had always shown. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with a party that seemed to include half of Kansas. Their children organized it, sending invitations far and wide, and people came from distances that surprised them. Former neighbors, people they had done business with over the decades, friends they had made in town. The church in Wichita, the same church where they had married, was packed for the ceremony where they renewed their vows, their voices quavering but firm as they promised again to love each other until death parted them. At the reception afterward, held in the big barn that Adam had built with his own hands, their son James stood to give a toast. He was a man in his 40s now, weathered and strong like his father, and when he spoke, his voice carried across the crowd. "My parents taught me what love looks like. Not the easy kind that you see in books, but the real kind. The kind that shows up every single day. The kind that works hard and sacrifices and never gives up. My father once told me that he promised to keep my mother warm forever, and I have watched him keep that promise my entire life. Not just by cutting wood, though he still does that, but by being present, being faithful, being her partner in everything. That is the example they set for all of us, and we are all better for it." There was not a dry eye in the barn when he finished. Adam stood and pulled Penelope to her feet, and they danced to a fiddle tune played by one of their grandsons who had inherited musical talent from somewhere. They moved slowly, carefully, but their steps matched perfectly after 5 decades of learning each other's rhythms. Later that night, when everyone had gone home and they were alone in their house, Penelope sat at her dressing table, taking down her hair. Adam came up behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. 50 years, he said softly. Half a century. Best 50 years of my life, she replied. Same. Though I hope we have a few more in us yet. I plan on it. You are not getting rid of me that easily, Adam Vaughn. He smiled, that same smile that had made her heart flutter when she was 19 and still had the power to move her now. Would not dream of it. They did have more years, blessed with a handful more. They saw more grandchildren born and even 2 great-grandchildren before the end. They watched the world change around them as the old century gave way to the new, as the Wild West they had known slowly became tamer, more settled. But some things did not change. Every November, on the anniversary of the day they met, they stood together by the woodpile, now maintained more for sentiment than necessity. Adam would put his arm around Penelope, and she would lean into him, and they would remember that cold day when 2 desperate, lonely people found each other and built a life. In his 73rd year, Adam's heart began to fail. The doctor told them gently that there was nothing to be done, that age simply caught up with everyone eventually. Adam accepted this news with the same practical calm he had approached everything in his life, but Penelope raged against it. After surviving so much together, the thought of losing him was unbearable. We had an agreement, she told him one evening as they sat together, her voice fierce through her tears. Forever. You promised forever. Adam took her hand, his grip still strong despite his weakening body. And I kept that promise, Penny. I gave you every single day I had. Forever does not mean we do not die. It means what we built together lives on. Our children, our grandchildren, this land, this love. That is forever. She knew he was right, but it did not make it any easier. She cared for him through his final months with the same determination she had shown that long-ago winter, refusing to let anyone else take over. Their children wanted to help, to spare her the hardest parts, but she was adamant. I took vows, she told them, in sickness and in health. This is health now, being together, taking care of each other. Let me do this. So she did. She helped him eat when his appetite failed. She read to him when he was too tired to read himself. She held his hand through long nights when breathing was difficult. And she told him, over and over, that she loved him, that he was the best thing that had ever happened to her, that she would be grateful for their life together until her own last breath. On a cold evening in December, with the first snow of winter falling softly outside, Adam took his final breath. Penelope was beside him, holding his hand, and she felt the moment his spirit left, felt the terrible absence of him even as his body remained. Their children came, and the house filled with grief and love in equal measure. They buried him in the small cemetery on a hill overlooking their property, next to the spot Penelope had already chosen for herself. The funeral was huge, attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched over 7 decades. People spoke of his kindness, his integrity, his skill with horses, his devotion to his family. But it was Penelope who spoke last, standing at his graveside with her children supporting her on either side. Her voice was thin and wavering but clear. Adam Vaughn showed up at my door on the hardest day of my life and offered help without expecting anything in return. That is who he was from that first moment to his last breath. He was good and true and solid as the earth itself. He promised to keep me warm forever, and even now, even though he is gone, I am still warm from the fire we built together. I will love him until I take my own last breath, and then I will find him again, and we will be together for whatever comes after. She lived 3 more years after Adam's death, years spent surrounded by family and sustained by memory. She still rose early, still made her rounds of the property that was now managed by James but would always be hers and Adam's in her heart. She spent her days with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather, making sure they knew what kind of man he had been. On the 3rd anniversary of Adam's death, Penelope woke feeling different, lighter somehow. She knew, with the strange certainty that sometimes comes at the end, that her time had come. She was not afraid. She had said her goodbyes, made her peace, lived a full and beautiful life. She was ready to see Adam again, to hear his voice, to feel his arms around her one more time. She walked through the house one final time, touching things that held memory, furniture Adam had built, quilts she had sewn, photographs of a life well lived. Then she put on her warmest coat and walked out to the woodpile, the one that was still kept stacked against the north wall out of tradition, and she stood there in the winter cold, remembering the terrified 19-year-old girl she had been, alone and desperate. Remembering the young man who had shown up to help, who had seen past her fear to the strength beneath. Remembering 53 years of love and work and family and joy. Her granddaughter found her there an hour later, sitting peacefully against the woodpile, a smile on her face, gone to join the man she had loved for more than half a century. They buried her next to Adam, just as she had wanted, and on her gravestone, James had carved the words Adam had said to her that day so long ago. "I will keep you warm forever." And beneath it, Penelope's response, "You absolutely did." The property stayed in the family for generations after that, the house carefully maintained, the barn still standing strong. The story of Adam and Penelope became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The woodpile remained, a symbol of the love that had sustained them, kept carefully stacked even when wood stoves gave way to modern heating. Sometimes, on cold November evenings when the wind blew hard across the Kansas prairie, family members swore they could see 2 figures standing by that woodpile, a tall man with his arm around a smaller woman, both of them looking at something only they could see. And the house always seemed warmer on those nights, as if some echo of the love that had been built there still remained, still kept everyone safe and warm, just as Adam had promised all those years ago. The land continued to thrive, passed down through the generations with care and pride. Each inheritor knew they were not just receiving property, but a legacy of love and perseverance, of 2 people who had found each other in the hardest of times and built something beautiful and lasting. The story lived on, told at family gatherings, shared with new spouses, taught to children who would carry it forward. And somewhere in whatever came after this life, Adam and Penelope Vaughn were together again, still building, still loving, still keeping each other warm through every season, every challenge, forever and ever and ever.